of what's going on here on FlintTalkRadio.com. And we're glad to have you with us this afternoon, but you can tune the program in anytime at your leisure. We are here from 2 to 3 every Monday. And, of course, we are taping, and you can catch us at your own leisure. And, of course, we're always happy to have you come along with us for the ride. That way, if you have anything you want to add to the program, since it's impossible to add once we've taped, then you can just call in, and we love to have you to join the conversation. I'm George Moss, the host of the program, and we come to you every week, as I said, and every 2 weeks we have Satora's Black History Corner that follows thereafter at 3:30, and that is starring two of the stars here at FlintTalkRadio.com. That's Miss Catherine Hunter Williams and Miss Catherine Blake, and their program usually runs about 30 minutes from 3:30 to 4, and they are doing really good in their program. They're here every 2 weeks, but we're here every week, and we will be here every week unless I have to take an exit out of the country, and we'll be in contact with the studio even when we are abroad, but that's not going to happen for at least a couple of more months, since I have not yet taken my annual trek out of the country to find out what else is going on in the world. And can come back here and tell you at FlintTalkRadio.com what's going on, not just here in Flint. We are a worldwide entity, and we want to keep you informed about what's going on wherever there are any happenings that should be of your concern. And today, speaking of concerns, we're going to talk about two main concerns. And if I have enough time, I'm going to get into a third one. But the two that I have come to the studio to discuss will be Mark Levine, and I'm going to make a few comments about the trial that's going on in terms of Nidal Hasan. And when we get to that, hopefully we'll have enough time to go into that and explore that for a few minutes and let you know what's taking place at the trial and some of the heroic things that have taken place. And might talk a little bit about what's happening over in Egypt and why that chaos is taking place over in the most populous Arab country in the world. Egypt is the largest Arab country by population with about 60 million people. And although it's not the largest Muslim country in the world, that distinction is owed to Indonesia. Egypt is the largest Arab country in the world, a place where I was before these upheavals took place. I was there in 1984 and was looking forward to at some point returning. I don't know when that's going to happen, given all of the things that are happening right now in that part of the world. But stay tuned. We might get around to that. It's not promised, but we will and try to cut down on some of the other two segments we're going to be covering this afternoon and see if we can get that in as well. I want to start off talking about what I was looking at last night at a replay of a program that was on Hannity that, if you see me looking around, I'm trying to figure out which camera because we have so many cameras here right now at FlintTalkRadio.com. You know, I can remember when I had to look straight forward, that was a camera, and then that was it. Had no problem finding it. Now the lights are constantly changing, and you have to look around and see which camera is the one that's on now. There are two cameras over here, and I'll be looking over here. I think that's where the cameras are at this point. But I was watching a replay of Hannity's program that initially aired on Friday at 9 o'clock. And it played again last night, so it really pricked my attention. I saw it originally, but I was just kind of nothing else to do. Nothing else was on. Had come back from a particular event, and turned on the television set, and that was the program being re-aired. And it reminded me that I needed to finish up the conversation we had last week when we started talking about Mark Levine's book called The Liberty Amendments. And one point I wrote, in fact, I just got through writing on this on Facebook, and I wish you would join us there as well as joining us here every Monday at 2 o'clock on FlintTalkRadio.com. Join us also on Facebook, because there are some very, dynamic conversations that are going on as we begin to take a circuitous route around the power brokers that want us to have the information they pass out to us, spoon feed us, and give us this propaganda that comes out of these airways that they control. And we're definitely getting the word from the mountaintop when we're tuning in HLN and MSNBC and those stations, and we can trust everything that they say without any question. But just in case they might miss some things, then one way we can get around that and we can fill the blanks in is, in fact, have a conversation with each other in terms of where we will plant ideas and engage in discourse that comes from a variety of the other sources, because nobody, even if they were trying to be honest, and they're not trying to be honest, but if they were trying to be honest, even under that venue, you would still miss some things, because there is no one entity that can bring all the news that's happening all the time in a world that continues to roll around. And when we're sleeping, by the way, the world is not sleeping. Some other parts of the world don't have their nighttime. When we have our nighttime, they have daytime at that point. And as I found out when I was in South Africa, I went down there thinking that because it was some over here, some over there, and went over there and froze in 2007. So something is always happening, and it's impossible for one entity anywhere in the world to be sitting in a certain location and then cover everything that's going on all over the world. That's an impossibility. And so we have each other, and we're all situated in different parts of the world, even our own neighborhoods where things are going on, and we can come together and share those tidbits of information. And that is just as important as what we're being told through the control media. Some are being controlled from the outside, some of them controlling themselves and what they will, in fact, bring across the airways. Some of it is like a self-incarceration of the media, where they refuse to discuss some things that we ought to have in the purview of the public so they can have the information needed to make the best decisions. Well, one of the things that I was very happy to see a second time was Mark Levine, who I think is one of the smartest persons in the media. He's on radio here in Flint from 6 o'clock to 9. And I don't know if he comes on. I don't know if that's live or not. I was looking at his program I was listening to his program on Friday, and his program went from 6 to 9, and then Hannity starts at 9, and I assume that program was being taped live. So I don't know if the program on radio was taped or how he got away from the studio where he was taping that program to be at Hannity's studio, because he was there at the very beginning of it, and the program started at 9 o'clock. He was there for the whole hour. And they had a very conversant audience that was able to interact with Mark Levine, some of them making their own comments about the amendments that he's proposing, and making very insightful comments themselves. It was a very good conversation. No one raised their voices, and just a very calm, thoughtful, thought-provoking conversation where we were able to, in fact, have a discourse on some of the work that's got to be done if we are serious about saving this country. I wrote on my wall before coming to the studio that I think that, and this is not taking anything away from Mark Levine, because Mark Levine's book is not mimicking anything that anyone has said. I mean, he's not a parrot, but I would be remiss in my own attempt to be honest if I did not say that I think that what I wrote 6 months ago is what stimulated the writing of this book. I see too many parallels in it for me to feel that there was just no contact. John, John, I read too much of that of myself in that book that Mark Levine put out. We talked about that in February, right? In February of this year. Right. And I had written certain articles on Facebook about the need to call a constitutional convention and to use a never used before part of the Constitution, which is Article 5, the provision that allows us to go around Congress to a large extent They're only involved, as a matter of fact, in the very first part of the process, amending the Constitution in the process that's allowed to us by the framers, put in the Constitution, but never used before. And for some reason, there's always been a lot of silence built around it as if it doesn't even exist. I wonder why that's taking place. But anyway, I was calling in February of this year for the convening of a Constitutional Convention as the only real systemic approach to how we're going to change what is happening in Washington without having to resort to using bearing arms, which I'm not advocating that.
Do you believe, though, we actually have a chance? I pretty much, I think we got with the election of Barack Obama and his radical agenda, I think that was just the last nail in the casket.
Yeah.
I don't think there's a chance this country's ever going to, it's going to be a socialist nation, like it or not. I think that's, I don't like it. I hate it. But we can't criticize this president because as soon as you do, you're called racist.
Yeah, well, we're going to be called some names. But, that was one thing, John, that came up last night. And one of the persons said to Levine, he said, look, I like your book. Everything you wrote in there, I agree with. I think this was, I think her name is Crowley. Anyway, one of the person in the audience said that she admired what Mark Levine had written, but she said that what you just said, John. She thinks that we have crossed the Rubicon, and that what has been put in place, that we have actually crossed the tipping point, and that what has been put in place here, given the fact that half the country is now dependent on government, and the other half is trying to produce some things for the country. Part of the country is pulling the weight down, some of it trying to pull the weight up, and that growing burden upon the producers is to such an extent right now that we are being disadvantaged as every day passes. And what Mark Levine said, I thought was quite instructive, because I don't think he disagreed with that, John. I think what he is saying is that he wasn't willing to crawl up in a fetal position and throw his hands up. I know you're not saying that either, but there is a question mark, and we are called upon to try to answer the questions that have been raised. And if the answers are not sufficient, then let it be known that we did our best. But to be compliant and quiet under these circumstances, I think, is a disservice to and dishonor to our ancestry, those who in fact made this republic possible and promised it to us and gave us a way in order to maintain it, and for us not to use what is in fact given to us as a tool.
I think the president and I think the Supreme Court, though, would step in and do whatever they wanted to do. I mean, they would do whatever Obama wanted because they seem to be willing to go along with whatever he wants.
Yes.
Obamacare not unconstitutional. From my understanding of the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, I don't know how the hell they came to that conclusion. So
they rewrote it.
I don't know if the Constitution they're coming from and the Constitution I look like vastly different documents. But.
Yes. John, one of the amendments that Mark Levine proposes, I didn't propose this one, but there were some of the ones he put down there. It's almost like those are my words almost. But there was some, he's creative, and Mark Levine is a constitutional scholar, and we have to give him that. I think, as I said earlier, I think he's one of the smartest persons in the media. And there are some good ones out there. I like Judge Napolitano, but I don't know even if Judge Napolitano is as prolific, although he does understand the Constitution and he does a good job of representing it. But I don't know how you stack up against Mark Levine in terms of a heads up. They both know the law, and that's critical to us getting where we need to go. We need to have people in front of us to understand the parameters that we are in, and understand, as Mark Levine said, that the firewalls of the Constitution have been breached.
See, I'm glad to see Levine's actually emerging more as a constitutionalist rather than, I always considered him more of a neocon. The scant writings, and I got to admit that I haven't read a lot of his stuff, but he's basically a neocon. For those who don't know what it is, basically, in my opinion, that's what the definition I'm giving is what is a neocon. A neocon is basically a liberal for all social policies, but is a hawk for United States security as well as their support for Israel. And that's basically what I always got when I read Levine. He was like he was more of a And I have a question about that. To support the Zionist cause, all that stuff, I don't agree with it, and I kind of dismissed him. So I mean, if I'm glad that he's coming out more along the lines of something that has teeth than the neocon position. Neocon to me is kind of a watered down. Anything you have neo in front of it means watered down, in my opinion. And,
Well, that post that I did on Mark Levine generated that very comment almost in a couple of places. Those wrote on that post were calling attention to some of the past of what they saw as his transgressions. And I didn't try to ward off those comments or defend Mark Levine in that. What I want to stay focused on is that this is something we can all come together on and support, because without it being a call to arms, then one thing that he said we didn't know how this would end up, but he did say one thing we do know, that if we do nothing, we know exactly how it's going to end up. And so that's the critical issue as far as I'm concerned. I do understand there are some other things we could sit around and argue about, but I think what we cannot argue about is that we are on what F.A. Hayek wrote about in 1944 in his book called The Road to Serfdom, that we are on the pathway to tyranny in this country. If we don't intervene and stop it, that's where this inevitably has to end up. It cannot end up in liberty, but where we're going right now and what is in fact happening on the federal level, where John Stosser did a program saying everything in the country is being outlawed. And so that's what's happening. And I don't know how much of it has to do with pure evil as an intent, but anytime you are taking away liberty and taking away individual rights, that cannot be seen as being benign. And so whatever is in the back of people's minds, if that is what's going on, whatever is driving it, we have got to, in fact, try to bring it under arrest. I said also that I'm not willing to concede, as so many do, who understand what's going on. They want to try to figure out what the triggers are, and they want to import conspiracy as a way of understanding it. I said on my post today that although I am not an alarmist. First of all, let me get that out. I'm not an alarmist. I don't believe in sounding alarm when there's no reason for it. But when I say that we are in a crisis mode in this country, I'm not trying to be an alarmist, nor do I think I'm being an alarmist. I think that's exactly where we are right now. If anybody has their eyes open, they can see this very clearly for themselves. That we are going down a very slippery slope, and if this continues, it's not going to end well. And we've seen examples of this kind of thing that's happening right now in what was promised us as a constitutional republic. We've seen where this ends up, and all the ones who in fact have tried this experiment in the past, and it's all ended up the same place, where if we don't stop it, and they didn't stop it in their time period, if we don't stop it here in our time period, the outcome is not going to be different. The history is very clear, and it's been written in blood. So if we continue down this pathway, let me just tell you that it's not going to go good, and it's not going to end well. And there's no sense in us hiding our heads in the sand, acting like this travesty taking place, that which could not have been foreseen even 30 years ago, that we'd be at this crisis mode that we're in right now, where none of the constitutional moorings that were given to us are working. All branches of the federal government are in fact corrupt. And nothing speaks to that corruption more loudly than Obamacare, which is what John was just saying a minute ago, in terms of how the Supreme Court was able to twist and contort the Constitution in such a way as to make it appear that you can in fact impose a product upon the American people and make them purchase it, and say that the Constitution allows for that, as long as you call it a tax. You can create the product to be taxed, and then after having created it, then you can tax it. If you can find that in the Constitution anywhere, and they'd have to be talking about Article 1, Section 8, the 17 clauses there that are talking about what the Congress can do, and the 18th clause, which is the proper and necessary clause under that particular article in section, then if you can find it there, I'll eat the words. one letter at a time on that page. But that's what they were using, specifically using Article 1, Section 8, Clause 3. Well, what they did was that it was brought on Article 1, Section 8, Clause 3, but they used on Article 1, Section 8, Clause 1, made it a tax, and then said that the power of the tax is a constitutional right given to Congress, and therefore, given that it's now being defined as a tax, it can therefore be authorized as being constitutional because the power of taxation is given the very first provision of Article 1, Section 8. It's sure nonsense, and that's one of the reasons why I do like the independence of thought that Mark Levine showed, which was that although I made 14 suggestions, he made 11, and they're not all down the road the same. I mean, Mark Levine brought some things into it that was of his own thinking. I think I gave him the idea because I wrote Mark Levine, and I told him what I was trying to do. I called all of them, by the way. I tried to call them and didn't get any response back, but I called all of them, and I knew I didn't have the national reputation to bring this thing to bear up on the national level, and I wanted them to understand that we can play these musical chairs where we change this person and throw him out and bring this one in. Then you've got to throw him out later on, and some of them get in there and not thrown out. Even in 2010, where we brag about the number of persons that we sent home, 85% of them still stayed. And that was considered to be a revolution in my mind because some of the incomers were thrown out, which is very hard to do, and some of them didn't run again, and that was a good thing. But it didn't shake Washington up. They went in there and became part of the club. Now I'll tell you somebody that's worried me right now, and that is, and not worried me because I am surprised to hear how he is now sounding. But one of the persons who is now coming out to show his true colors is this guy that took Jim Bunning's place down there in Kentucky, Ron Paul's son, Rand Paul. I want you to listen to him very carefully. Tape when he comes on, tape his comments, and then go back through it carefully and just listen to what this man is saying, and then write some of the things down so you can see what he is actually saying. This guy is not what he's representing himself to be, and he talks out of both sides of his mouth. So the point I'm making is that sending them up to Washington one after the other, playing musical chairs or no musical chairs, or just sit in the chair and stay there for 57 years, as did John Dingell. I don't know what contribution you can make up there after the second term. I don't know. What have you not said? And what answers do you have that you've not already provided? And if you have not provided them in 2 terms, which would be 12 years in the Senate, then why is it that you have not provided it? I mean, how much can your mind conjure up to solve problems that you went to Washington to solve? But there are some problems that develop because you solved those problems, and some other problems materialize that you did not conjure up to go to Washington to fix. So why are you there fixing that which you didn't go to Washington to fix? Because there are unintended consequences of all political acts. Because as quiet as it's kept, there are no political solutions to problems. That's why you can't tell me right now, as I sit here and as I speak, of a single problem that's ever been solved by a politician, because there are no political solutions to problems. They're only trade-offs. So you trade this off. It's just like that medicine that they advertise on television. You know how they say, we want to treat this particular problem. Let's say your heart is palpitating. So, or maybe your arteries are clogged up because you need a statin drug. So you take this cholesterol pill, and then they tell you that it will lower your cholesterol. However, and that however part is very critical, but they say it in such a low voice you don't feel alarmed because they act like you shouldn't be. They should be screaming it and very emotional about it, but they're very calm. Sometimes they put this guy down. They put this guy going down an elevator, and you're supposed to be paying attention to them going down, and then assume that means that's where your cholesterol is going down into the basement. And so you're not alarmed. But they're telling you all these things, horrendous things that happen that you did not foresee. Now you're treating this problem, but here are all these other problems. So what do you have to do now? Go fix that. And that's what happens in Congress. I mean, they went there to fix some stuff. Okay, let's say you fixed that, which not really, but let's say that you imported an answer to it. Okay, that you traded off this for that which you went there to fix. Okay, you fixed that. Okay, you had a trade-off. But then here is the consequence of what you fixed, which you did not go there and could not foresee that was going to be a problem. Now you went there to fix this problem over here now, but you're now facing this problem. And are you telling me that you have as much understanding of the problem that did not prevail? The one you went there for, I assume you were looking at it over a period of time, and you went there to fix it because you thought, okay, I can do that. Been there, done that. I can do this one. But that one is created. You weren't thinking about that problem. And are you telling me that now you can jump from that problem over here to this problem, and you have just as much expertise to fix that? No, that's another person's job. And that's why one of the amendments that Mark Levine made, which I did not come up with this one, I did come up with what he talked about in terms of the term limits and those that are in office that have already gone over the term that we would limit them to. He does say almost word for word what I said, which was that you could finish your term out, but after that you got to go home. If you, for example, there's a 2-term limit. Now, I looked at all those names. I mean, it was a laundry list of names of all these people have been up there 20 some odd and 30 some odd years. Some up there more than that. And Dingle is a king of the Cowboys up there. I basically sleeping because you can't tell me. I know how many times I can take a nap. When I go somewhere, if I go 2 places and come back, you just time for me to take a 15-minute nap to rebuild my energy. And Thomas Sowell, I know what you're talking about too, because you talk about having to revitalize your energy. You're older than I am, but you're a thinker, and that tires you out. And so you have to rebuild your energy level, because when you get to this age, and please don't be asking me what age is that. It's older than you are, and. But, you have to rebuild your energy back up. It doesn't take long. You just have to lay down for a while and, revitalize. Your body is wearing down and things like that. That's just natural, and you shouldn't fear it. And age is what we all are faced with. And none of us going to get out of this alive, and might as well face that as a reality. But you have to rest. But then these guys go up there, and they're in these meetings that last all day from 9 to 5. That's beyond the coffee breaks, beyond the lunch hour. And going over sitting in these rooms, you try to sitting in a chair. I don't care how much cushion there is. You try sitting in a chair 5 days a week with no activity, just sitting at a desk, and you've been up there as long as Dingle, and just see if you can stay awake. That's why. By the way, in the classroom, the way it works is for young people. They don't give them any cushion. You know why? They don't want them to be awake. They want that blood left in their lower extremities where it doesn't get to the brain, because then somebody may start thinking and figure out that up there in the front of the room, they're talking that nonsense, and they should be turned off. But if you're sitting down for long periods of time and don't get up, and these meetings sometimes last, forever. They start in the morning and they don't break until lunch. So they're sitting there 2.5 hours. You know what they do in the school? The bell sounds every hour, and what that does, it allows the circulation in them walking, because they don't have the next class come and meet where the kids are. The kids walk, and they start regenerating their energy by walking to the next class. By the time they get there, ready to sit down again and take another dose of government medicine called propaganda and indoctrination, mind control and conditioning, all of those things. But they're sitting up there for, and Dingle's father, by the way, stayed there 22 years. So sitting up there all that time in these meetings, and you think those guys are awake? If they were awake, we would not have gotten Obamacare, where they're now saying, oops, I didn't know that was in there, because they're not up there alert and reading what they're passing. Most of these persons couldn't read it anyway. because they're not rocket scientists that are sent there. And I don't know why we put so much stock in them as being part of the government. They got elected because they were able to outplay the Santa Claus and the other party or the other opponent, and they just went up there and did more lying about they're going to do this, they're going to do the other thing, and then they get their votes. Then all of a sudden they become what, geniuses? No, they're limited just like you and I are. And to put any more to invest any more in these politicians than what we should do by limiting their terms is unconscionable, given the history of these guys and ladies is up there in the Congress. But sitting up there 20 and 30 and 40 years is it should not be allowed. And because it is the going rate, I mean 85% return in 2010 when we threw a lot of those persons out. We've got to simply have term limits, and that's one thing that Mark Levine proposed. I didn't propose. I did propose. I did propose term limits, and I did propose 12 years, which he also came and said, since the Senate one term is 6 years, then that would be a 12-year for the Senate, and there were six terms for the members of the House. And when a person asks that question in the audience, and they ask Mark Levine, who is really quick, by the way, and I have to give him credit. This guy is very, very sharp. And they asked him, well, one guy said, I have a little bit of a problem with that because the democratic process is that, the people should make the judgment about who the representatives are. And Mark Levine said that they can run for other offices. They can run on the state level. You're not limiting them from being able to give public service. You're simply saying in this particular post and in the place where they are, you limit their terms. So that's just the limitations placed upon their tenure, where they're not just sitting up there as if they are so smart, they have the answer to all the problems that ever come up in the history of the world, and they can solve them by just sitting up there in a chair and just importing all these solutions that they didn't go to Washington to in fact fix. That's to me unconscionable, and it's got to be addressed at some point in time. So that's one of the proposals there. I'll tell you another one that I like that Mark Levine brought up, and that is the one about I did propose that we would in fact have state interposition and nullification. Now I know you're going to be telling me about the Civil War, and that's what they were doing in the Civil War. Well, that's what all the states were advocating, and that's the only way they agreed to the Constitution in the first place, that they could in fact have oversight responsibilities over the federal government, not giving these persons the authority to dictate to the states. If they pass a law that's not found in this document called the Constitution of the United States, which, by the way, has not yet been suspended, at least not legally suspended, and it's still the rule of law in this country, although it's being dismissed in Washington. The fact of the matter is that if it's not in the Constitution, and they do it anyway, which is what they're doing, by the way, probably 99% of the time, then the states need to have a way in order to interpose themselves in between the unconstitutional act and the Constitution to put themselves in the breach, to in fact restore the walls that have been breached by the firewalls of the Constitution being breached. We must have a way to restore that balance. And you can't do that on the federal level, asking them to, in fact, guard the store, and they're the ones inside the store stealing from it. It's not going to happen. I mean, we have enough proof right now that Washington is not going to have oversight management of his own actions. And the way I know that to be true is I'm looking at the IRS right now. I'm looking at all the furor that was there at the very beginning, and we were so upset about Lois Lerner taking the Fifth Amendment. How can she do this? She's a taxpayer. She's working on the public dime. She's making $200,000 a year, and she's taking the Fifth Amendment of taxpayers. Well, yeah, and then you saw the incorrigible Jesse Jackson Jr. Don't get me started about that family. But you saw this incorrigible political figure who was making $174,000 paid for by hardworking taxpayers. And you think that would make this guy more honest and more respectful of taxpayers? He then dips into the taxpayers supporting his campaign those that was in his camp supporting him for re-election, and dips in there and pulls out another $750,000 for his girlfriend and for a lifestyle that he wanted beyond his means, rather than living within the lifestyle of I can live on 174,000. Yeah, that's a salary for me for 3 years. But this man couldn't do that on a yearly basis, and up there sitting in a chair to earn it.
Well, besides Jesse Jackson Jr., the one that was just sentenced, what is his degree in? And I mean, like his father, what the hell's his job?
His father never finished it. He went to North Carolina, played football there, and thought that he's supposed to be out there dating the girls and throwing the football on Saturday. And I don't know what his class. He never did share his grades, but I can imagine. And because I listen to him right now, and he doesn't know anything, so I can imagine what kind of grades he was making, unless it was just giving out. Unless it's like it is right now, where if you can breathe and you sit in the back of the room and don't talk, that's a C plus.
And I hear that his father, the young man, Jesse Jackson Jr., Jesse Jackson Sr., keeps on reminding people he's bipolar. Isn't that convenient they found it out after he gets in trouble and gets sentenced? Now we're supposed to let that go because he's bipolar.
Yes.
Well, if he was bipolar and so severely so, he should have held office in the first place. He should get treatment, and he should, that's a stressful job.
Yeah.
And he shouldn't. Bipolar, let's face it, you don't want them in a stressful situation.
Yes, John, you're making a great point. And what is bipolarity? Being bipolar means that you got caught. Let me tell you somebody else who's bipolar, and we got to send him into therapy too. And that's Robert Filner out there in California. Now, he's bipolar because he can't stop filling on the women in his office and asking them to come to work half dressed and make sure that you open up enough to allow him to have the kind of view he wants. And that's part of your job. I mean, to forget about what the state's paying you for. What he hired you for is in order to be able to, shoot some beaver. I mean, these people are really something, aren't they? And we're going to invest our future and the future of our country in the hands of these people who are perverted, either over power, over money, or sex. And we're supposed to invest them with the future of the nation and just assume that they have our well-being at heart. That to the tune of $16 trillion where they're taxing our grandchildren, which they would never pay off this debt, given the fact that one estimate that Levine made this past weekend, excuse me, was that there outside the $16 trillion of debt that we have right now that they admit to, he was saying that beyond that, we now also have to deal with $90 trillion dollars of unfunded liabilities. I don't know where we get the funds for that. They're only $77 trillion on the entire planet, and it's now all in this country right here. I got to say one other thing, too. This is a side point that I want to make this point because Oprah came up in the media last week, and I want to deviate just for a minute to bring Oprah in here because I got to talk about her for a minute because I'm not feeling the noise that she's out there making about Switzerland. I happen to come across a list of the freest nations in the world, which means I got to stop saying America's the greatest nation in the world. It was at one time. It's not that now. No, it's the freest nation in the world. Switzerland, where you had all these problems, and everybody was talking about, look how they treated Oprah over there because they wouldn't sell her a handbag for $38,000 because she was black. If you believe that, we need to send you to where Robert Field. They got a seat open now because Bob Filner from California, he's come back now from his going off and getting his therapy, and they got Jesse in jail. So there's two seats right there. There's two beds. There's two beds open right now because Jesse left his bed. He's now in federal. He'll be in a bed in federal prison, and Filner's back in the mayor's office because he went for 2 weeks of therapy and he's now back in there, totally cured and no problem now, nothing to see, and hopefully they recall him so he can. Whatever's to see, we can see it in his living room watching television. But there's a petition to get him out of there. But, all these people that go off and have therapy and come back and then they're serene now and they've been fixed and there's no additional problem. if we think we can turn the government over, the country over to these people, who are just getting caught, by the way, because you can say what you want to, that is not the going rate. So anyway, Oprah comes up and she's talking about the Swiss, and I'm thinking to myself, now I read about Hannibal up there in the Alps, and Hannibal went up there around 226 BC with it, and this African, this black person took elephants over there. You know, they were, rather than going up through, Rome, by way of Spain and going across, going up the Pyrenees and then into France, then going across, which is where the Romans had a blockade going. What Hannibal did was decide to go a route they had not yet conjured up. We're going to go up there from a place which is hot, and then come down to where they have this ice. And he took those elephants up there and came down the Alps, a way in which they had not cordoned off, and attacked them from the rear. Now the Swiss, the racists, the Swiss, when he came into Switzerland, they had the same problem that Hannibal had, and that was the Romans down there that was whooping them with those swords and making them get down there. And you thought that what we see right now going on, we're cutting some heads off in Switzerland. Of course, everybody cuts the heads off of the Swiss, and then the French already got their hands up in the air ready to surrender. So Hannibal enlisted the Swiss on his side, because they had a problem with Rome too, and they were joining. He only carried 20,000, maybe about 15,000. Some say 10. Polybius says 10,000, but he was able to recruit additional ones once he got there. By the way, if you want to read a really good book, you got to read this book by Livy, Livy, simply called Hannibal. I don't think I read a book any better than that book. You read those ancient writings. I kept saying this guy could not have written that during that time period. There's no way this writing could have been during that time. And I don't know how much of it got the translator got a hold to it, but that book is one of the best books I've ever read on Hannibal. I read Leonard Cartrell's book and some of the other books. Some of the things have been written by others that have just kind of alluded to him. But that's a Catholic right there. But the Swiss was supposed to be these real, today, Oprah going to tell us the what is really impossible to believe, that they got a $38,000 purse up there that they don't want to sell because it's going to pay the rent sitting up there on that shelf. And Oprah they won't give it to Oprah because the woman was so racist, full of racism, that this black woman, she didn't think could buy that purse, etc. Now I'll tell you what Oprah could have done if she wasn't trying to make a mountain out of a molehill, a lot of molehills, and that was just throw that black card. I don't have a black card. I got 2 cards, but they're not that card that Oprah got. That's a billionaires group there. Only a few persons got it. That's like you, Buffett, and you, Bill Gates. I don't have that card. Can't afford to have it because the carrying charge itself, if you charge a thing on that card, it's going to cost you an arm and a leg, and that's a year's pay for me.
Isn't Oprah supposed to be a smart woman?
Well, this guy named Michael Myers, who is over the Civil Rights Commission advocacy group in New York, says he knows her very well. And he's on TV a couple of, maybe last week before last, saying, look, he knows her. And so a lot of that it looks to me like what we're seeing now is that Oprah got her money and she got her network, and we're now seeing unmasking going on.
Well, see, I was going to say, if she's a smart woman, if I was a billionaire, I don't think I would have got that place by spending $38,000 for a purse. I mean, I really question. I think she might be losing it on sale. I mean, I don't see any. I mean, that's the price of an automobile.
Yeah, I'll tell you what my analysis of that is that I'll tell you what I think is going on here. I think it's tied into what we see in other areas as well. I think we're looking at the same thing in another genre that we saw with Michael Vick. And we see with some of the others who are trying to make it known that they're really apologizing for the success, and they want to make it known that I got out of the quote unquote hood, but I'm still down with the cause. I mean, look at how that plays out with people like Bill Gates, not Bill Gates, but Henry Louis Gates of Harvard University. I mean, why did he create a non-issue and make it something racial? other than to show that he's down with the cause. And I got my racial bona fides, although I'm up here at Harvard University, and he's down with the cause. What is Michael Vick doing when he's up there making millions of dollars a year playing football and running all over the backfield and escaping the lineman and making millions of dollars doing that, and then still fighting dogs he did before he had a dime and was fighting dogs to make a living? I don't think you should fight dogs. I can't even see fighting dogs. I got 2 dogs, and I just see how gentle they are, and I just can't see it. But he's still doing that as a millionaire. Why? Because he's doing the same thing Oprah's doing, and that is to say that we left, but we still, give me some dap here, and I'm still.
Yeah, I'm still suffering.
Yeah, I'm still.
I'm still suffering.
I got this mansion, and I'm eating caviar. Anytime I want. I got servants in here, but do not think I became less black.
Well, the other thing is too, it's like I say this about Michael Moore too. My only criticism is he's worth over $100 million. Probably going to lose that because he's going through a divorce.
Yeah,
he's going to lose a good chunk of that. Welcome to reality. But, okay, I love Flint. If I was making $100 million or whatever off of the movies I made of basically using Flint as a backdrop, I'd still live here. I still live here now. I could have moved.
Sure.
All right. So these people are going around saying, "I'm down with the cause," and why aren't you in the neighborhood? Why aren't you in these neighborhoods? Why aren't you bettering them? What are you guys doing? You got, Oprah's one of the richest people on the planet. And what has she done? She opened up a school in Africa. Why is that in Chicago?
Well, she didn't get any more money, by the way. She got her money here.
Yeah. Yeah, but, why didn't she open one in Chicago?
Mm-hmm.
Why didn't she open one in Detroit? Why didn't she open one in L.A.?
Yeah. John, do you know what Oprah's wealth is? Oprah's worth $2.8 billion. She is the most successful woman in the history of the United States, self-made. And we talk about other blacks, like Madam C.J. Walker. We talk about her, right. The woman that was in the hair straightening, all that. Right. She made money, but she was nowhere near, not even close to what Oprah's wealth is.
Who was Oprah's audience? It was whites.
Whites in the audience. And if she had come out of, and really she began to lose some of her audience when she came out for Barack Obama, whom she knew better than we knew because they went to the same church. She left that church, by the way, some time ago, but she knew what that church was doing, and Barack Obama stayed in there, so she knew who this guy was and sold him to her. She was speaking out for him in 2008. And some of our audience who began to look at this guy and understood his baggage began to become askers of Oprah. Oprah's response was quite interesting back in that time period. She said, and she was very careful in how she framed it. She said, in her defense, I'm a free, and she caught herself before she said a free black woman. I'm a free woman. That's what she said. Because you make it racial, then that's a tip off to the audience that made you who you are and what you are. And owning a station, all that is impossible if you're depending upon your black viewership.
Oh, by the way, Mr. Moss, did you hear that?
Because you don't have no dancing on there.
We have a congressman or congresswoman or senator who was 165 years old because just a few weeks ago she proclaimed herself standing there as a freed slave. Remember here? I don't know if you remember who was that. What was that? Black congressman or congresswoman, wasn't it?
Yeah, congresswoman. Yeah, that was this Sheila Jackson.
That's what I thought.
Down there in Texas, who is the premier airhead number 2. Now you have to say number 2 because Maxine Waters is still there.
We should stop the press because she has proclaimed herself to be the oldest person probably on the planet.
Yeah, she has. She picked cotton. You'd have to be 2,000 years old to have actually experienced that. She stands up there with her racial bona fides saying, making $174,000 a year, plus they gave him a raise, that I'm speaking as a former slave. Lady, come here. Slavery ended, and I'm going to take this real slow so even the Black Caucus can understand this. The Congressional Negro Caucus can understand it. Slavery, that's three syllables. Slavery ended, 2 syllables, in 1865 by way of the 13th Amendment, not the Emancipation Proclamation. The 13th Amendment legally ended slavery in the United States. For you to stand up there and disrespect those that actually went through the horrors of slavery and claim that that's your ancestral root, your own root, not your ancestral root, your own experience. In 2013, the black community should have called for your resignation just for you to make that statement. That's how bad it is that nobody is holding you accountable for that blasphemy. And that's what that was.
I mean, I think that was. I mean, she's well preserved. I mean, I got to say that she's well preserved.
We want to find out what the secret is because she's better preserved than Tutankhamun over there in the tombs. And I was over there in 1984, and I saw. I said, "Wow, look how well preserved." Well, she's better preserved than he is. Well, in fact, still walking around. But she was back there in the day. She's speaking as a former slave, and she wants to take that particular crutch and beat you across the head with it. Therefore, anything has to do with race, she's the expert. You can't tell her anything. Yet, when I hear people talking, the only one that I have actually heard an adult speaking about in terms of race has been one black person, one white person, and that's Bill O'Reilly and Dr. Ben Carson. I have not heard a discussion on race, and there was a discussion that he had with some others too, like Juan Williams, who finally made some sense in that discussion he had with Bill O'Reilly talking about race. And if I'm to assume that when we have a discussion about race, and I'm one of the ones not calling for a discussion on race, because I don't think that the discussion on race is going to do anything, because race is not our problem. If you're talking about our being black, you look here. This is Moss, okay? This is this is George Moss. And for you to try to tell me, I'm a historian, and for you to tell me, I'm teaching the teachers now, so for you to tell me that if we have a conversation about race, somehow the problems that blacks are facing in this country that are no longer racial, and the reason why they're no longer racial, by the way, is because the problems facing black folks are no longer political. I hope I get a chance to do that program, because I think the best place to go and research that part is the book written by Ann Coulter. Both her the last two books, but the one called Demonic is very good, and the one that she just put out called Mugged, Racial Demagoguery from 1970s to Obama, that book is even better, but Demonic is a good book. You can get that one for chump change right now. The one she just put out is a little bit more expensive because it hasn't gone down in price. It's still, selling. But if you want to wait until that one goes down because you're just as cheap as I am, then wait, go read the other one first and let that one, continue to lose market share, and then it goes down in price. You can buy that one later. But go and read the one called Demonic, which has been out for a while, and get to the chapters where she deals with the civil rights movement, and she does an excellent job about that. But the problem that blacks had in this country was the problem they had with these politicians in the Democratic Party. Once we got them out of the way, the political problems we had, those problems, in fact, were ended. And in fact, by being ended, the need for the civil rights organizations also ended at that point. Because we do have problems, but they're no longer political problems. And if they're not political problems, they're not civil rights problems. I guess what I'm doing there is simply agreeing with John Smith. No, I'm sorry, Robert C. Smith. John is John Doe. Robert C. Smith, who has a book out called We Have No Leaders. I had to take that book over to Lansing, where he's speaking at Michigan State. And he was surprised when I pulled the book out because I wanted him to sign the book. And he was surprised that I even knew about the book and that I had a copy of it, because I think they pulled it off the shelf. And I don't know if it's even now can be found. Some copies will be out there. But he wrote a book called We Have No Leaders, and I think on page 268 of that book, on page 268, I think it's the way he was quoting the great Harold Cruz, who didn't have a degree, by the way, but wrote this fantastic book called The Crisis of the Negro Intellectual back in the 1960s, around 1967, somewhere around there, and wrote this magnificent book, and that was enough to get him into some of the college doors, because nobody had written a book on that level before, and was able to go into so many different fields of information and then ferret out something that made sense and was reasonable, and therefore he was an authentic scholar, as opposed to some of these persons out here hollering hot air just because they got a PhD but don't know anything. He was an authentic scholar, but he quoted him in that book, We Are No Leaders, and in that book he was making the comment that Harold Cruz shook his tree because one of the students, when Cruz came to speak at the school where Robert Smith was working at that time, made the comment that we don't have any black leaders. And Smith was not buying that. And he could not believe Harold Cruz's answer, which was that we don't have any leaders because there are no people out there right now in front of the black community that have any communitarian solutions to the problems facing the black community. And Smith couldn't buy that, but he's a scholar, so what he did was go behind Cruz to do his own investigation. And then he writes in his book and says that this book verifies and authenticates the observation made by Cruz that he first of all didn't go along with. So we got to get some understandings out here is the bottom line, and we don't have them yet. And we cannot get sidetracked with Oprah telling us somebody wouldn't sell us something for $38,000 when they're trying to pay their light bills. And I listened to that woman. I heard her accent, and I have to tell you, that woman is hard to understand. And I bet you that Oprah Winfrey was just as hard to understand that she was talking to this lady. Because, you know, one thing that I found out when I travel outside the country, you know, we don't think we have an accent because we listen to ourselves all the time. But when I was in Africa, I was with my guide, and I'm trying to be conversing, I'm trying to be friendly, and the guy would say, look, they don't understand what you're talking about. And so that's where it is. And so we got to get back to...
See, Oprah's got to, I mean, Oprah, anybody who's got money travels, becomes the ugly American. Because they think that anybody in the world will speak English if you speak it loud enough and slow enough.
Yeah, right.
If you speak it loud enough and slow enough, everybody in the world will understand you.
Yeah, and every word you pronounce has the same sound to it, as if the way we make the sound of the words, that's the way the word, you know, is to them. That when they're not making sense, is we think that when we can't understand them, we think they're not making sense. When a lot of folks understand that over there where they are. We just don't understand it. So we can't get sidetracked. We got work to do. Mark Levine, I want to give you credit. I want to give you a big shout out here. I'm not trying to take any credit from you. I'm in back of you 1,000%. We've got to get in back of your call to arms and save this country because we are on automatic pilot right now. And that book called The Liberty Amendments, 11 in number. I mean, not get all of them. Get the ones that are the most crucial. And get those into the Constitution as a way of nailing back down the federal government because we've got to either nail the government down or all is in fact lost. I guess we got to get out of here, right, John?
About a minute and a half.
Okay. So we got to nail some boards down, and don't think that there's not some work you can do. We have got to, this is not going to happen overnight. Mark Levine has said that we're talking about a decades-long struggle, but we must begin at a certain point. We can't start waiting until 10 years is up and then start down that at that time down that path. We got to start right now, and there are some things we can do in the present time period, so that by the time we get to the decade that it may well take to build this movement and bring this result about, we've done a lot of the work already. Our ancestors are calling for it, the founders are calling for it, and our children and grandchildren are demanding it from us. And if we fail to do what we can do, may all of the judgment that's ever existed rain down supreme upon our heads because we got work to do and we got to get busy. Okay, John is giving me the signal there, unless he's trying to cut his head off because he's giving me this signal here of going across his throat. So either he got a knife back there, get ready to use it and commit suicide, and I got to go over here and take him to the hospital.
I'm so overwhelmed by the State of the Union. That's I'm going to do myself in.
and we don't want him to do that because we need him in the studio every week because without John, I don't know what we would do here at FlintTalkRadio.com and some of the others here as well. But these lights are on for a reason. Until next time, I want to thank you first of all for staying with us for an hour as I go through my little rants and raves. I'm glad you stayed with us for an hour, and we'll be back next week, same time. And want you to stay tuned to all the programs here at FlintTalkRadio.com. Until next time, want you to follow your dream. Because if you don't follow your dream, you'll never know what's on the other side of the rainbow.